Alright, so here we have a 2017 Lamborghini Huracan Spyder. This is the 580-2, which means it's rear-wheel drive and has less output from the engine than the 610-4. So this is powered by a 5.2-liter naturally aspirated V10, the same one that's in the Audi R8. And this one produces 580 horsepower and 397 pounds of torque in the 580-2. The car is capable of 0 to 60 in the 3.4 to 3.6 second range, I believe, with the rear-wheel drive. And it weighs around 3,300 pounds. This car, as spec'd, was around $245,000. Base price was around $209,000, I believe, for the rear-wheel drive Spyder. A lot of people prefer the driving dynamics of the rear-wheel drive to the all-wheel drive, including myself. And obviously, this being a Lamborghini and not the Urus, which is their SUV, the engine is mounted in the rear, which means it has a trunk in the front. So I will open that up. Now, in order to open the trunk in the car, there's actually a button on the key that you hold to do that. So I will pop it. There's also a button inside of the car that you can push open as well, which I will show you in a little bit. Now, unlike the McLaren, you do have a little latch underneath that you need to push to open the trunk. So you lift it up and then the trunk pops open. Looking inside the trunk, it's relatively the same space you'd get in like a 570S and most cars with a front trunk that you would see nowadays. And here you'll see you have a pouch. These have tools and I believe an instruction manual in one of them. And you have a light and a little 12-volt cigarette lighter socket. And then down here you'll see that you also have a latch that'll let you out of the trunk if you get locked in. Moving out from the trunk, going up here towards the windshield with the trunk still open, you'll see you have your windshield washer fluid filler right there. Going over here, there's a little cap underneath this. It doesn't say exactly what it is, but I believe it's coolant that's underneath there that you can fill up. And that's what the inside of the trunk looks like. And then looking back at the front of the car, you can see you have a fairly aggressive air dam in the front. And this wedge shape is obviously very signature for the Lamborghini Huracan. And moving over to the wheels, this car has 20-inch wheels in the front with two 45/30 cross-section tires. And in the rear, it also has 20-inch wheels. These are 305/30 for the cross-section of the tires. Now, as you can see in the rear, it has very aggressive styling. You have your taillights up top. You have your extractor vents below those. And then you have quad exhaust, 2 tips on each side. And you also have your backup camera integrated right here above the license plate. And then your finned diffuser down below. And if you go back up top, you can see that there's an integrated spoiler in the rear. And then you have fins covering the engine bay. And moving on to the right, you can see you have your gas filter cap. So there actually is not a cap underneath this. You just pop this open as in most modern supercars. And then you put gas into the tank that way. And looking in here, you actually have an intake vent. This could be intake or heat extraction. I've seen it go both ways, even though it's facing forward, depending on the car. This one is most likely an intake, though, to keep the engine cool. And then looking here, you can see the rear lid that pops open as the roof opens. And as I mentioned before, the roof is a cloth top, and this rear window does open with the roof up. And if you see these little panels back here, I believe those are actually a rollover mechanism that probably jack out. A lot of convertibles have those to keep the occupants safe in case of a rollover with the roof open. I believe that's what those do. And this is what the car looks like with the lights on. And the integrated side markers, front and rear. And then that's what the taillights look like. And moving over to the door, as you can see, the door handles are integrated directly into the door. You can push the little recess on the left to pop them open. If the door is unlocked, then you can pull the door open. If not, then the handles will just stay there and they don't do anything. In order to get them to pop out, you just hit the unlock button and they pop out. And you hit the lock button again on the key and they go back in. So, unlocking the car and opening the door. This is what the car looks like with the door open. And with the door open, if you look at the end of the door, there's actually this point that sticks out. And I remember I've gouged myself in the thigh quite a few times opening the door, staying too close to it, not expecting that point to be there. Especially going from another car and then getting into this one, you kind of forget that it's there. Going inside, this is what the door looks like. So as you can see, this has black leather with black Alcantara and red stitching. And moving in, you obviously have your door handle, your lock and unlock. Up here you have the controls for your side mirrors, as well as your heated mirrors at the top. And rotating this down to the bottom will fold your mirrors in. Going down here, you obviously have a little side pocket that you can utilize. And this here, I believe, is actually a motion sensor disable button. I believe this car does have an interior motion sensor, which a lot of modern cars do have. As you can see, it says Huracan on the kick plate when you get in the car. Going inside the car, as I mentioned before, it's all black with red stitching. You have leather with contrast Alcantara. And this particular spec actually has the Huracan Performante seats. So as you can see, they have carbon fiber shells with basically really thin pads and Alcantara and leather over them. And they are completely manually operated. So there's a little handle underneath that you grab and slide back and forth. Now these seats are actually end up being more comfortable, at least for me, because I'm around 6'2". And the standard seats actually have enough padding to add another like 4 or 5 inches, plus how far forward the seat has to sit. So you're losing about 6 or 7 inches of distance from the pedals to the back of the seat. And for me, being 6'2", my knees hit the steering wheel with the standard seats. So it's actually much more comfortable for me to get in and out of. They are fairly hard seats. Most of my friends that have Huracan Performantes, they use like cushions and stuff like that, and I understand why. And then as you can see, there's not much of a rear shelf in the back. It's just a window, and you have a few inches of space between that and the back of the car. And then moving down the back, you'll see you actually have a disc changer, as well as 2 SD card slots. And moving forward from that, you have a little armrest, which also has a very small storage compartment, which I'll show you in a second. And then you have this, it's actually plastic, but it looks like aluminum trim, contrasted with black plastic. This whole centerpiece is mostly plastic, except for these little leather pads here. And this is something I didn't know was an option until a friend of mine who has a Huracan told me that his doesn't have it, and it is actually an option, is you get a cup holder package. So the cup holder is under here, and as you can see, it's kind of useless because it sits under the bridge, and it sits about, 4 inches in, and it only has about 3 or 4 inches of clearance above it. So you can't actually get anything in there. I haven't been able to myself anyway. And another part of the cup holder package is this here. It actually sits in the dash, and I didn't realize it was there for the longest time because it's integrated as one of those patterns, and you actually have to push it in and it slides out. And it's very shallow. It kind of works with a standard water bottle, and that's about it. So going back into the center, this is what that little storage area looks like. As you can see, it's only about maybe 2 inches deep. It's probably designed for just a phone, maybe a key, and then you have a cigarette lighter inside of there, as well as what I'm guessing is a little multi-adapter plug, like the old Mercedes have. All right, closing that back down. Moving forward. So, going into the center stack here. Starting on the right side, you have a switch. So if you look at the top, you'll see a little window icon, and then below that you'll see a aluminum-looking switch. Once again, it's all plastic. If you pull that switch, it raises and lowers the rear window that I mentioned earlier. In the center, you have the electronic parking brake. And on the left, you have the icon, and then below that, the switch for the roof. Moving up in the stack, you have your controls for gear selection. So this lever in the middle, you pull it up and it puts you into reverse. The P is obviously park, and then M switches you in and out of manual mode. In order to put the car in gear to go forward for drive, for gear 1 for example, you actually just pull the paddle forward, or pull the paddle towards you just like you would in a Ferrari. Moving up here, you have the engine start-stop. So this is actually a start-stop button that's covered by a little flap, and you can lift that flap up just like in a jet fighter, and then push the start button. And that's what it looks like up. And that piece there is actually metal. I believe it's like die-cast metal, though. It doesn't feel like a really high-quality metal, but it's still better than being plastic. And even with the flap closed, you can push the start-stop button by pushing your finger through there, so you don't really have to open the flap. So it's it's a pretty cool design. Moving up from the start-stop button, you have all of your controls for the infotainment. So as you can see, you have your navigation going from top left to right. You have your navigation menu telephone, and then you have your info back car button that takes you into the car menu. Below that, you have a little dial that you rotate to select menu items, and then you push it in to actually select that item. And if you notice the buttons on the left and right, top and bottom of that dial, those are actually selections in the menu, which I'll show you later. So you have like a top, left, right, and bottom. Or sorry, top right, top left, and bottom right and bottom left selection that you can push on the menu. So they're kind of like shortcuts. So moving to the right side, you'll see you have your radio and media button at the top. Below that, you have your previous and next track button. In the center of those, you have a little dial with 2 icons below it. That's your volume dial, and if you push it in, that's going to be the power for your infotainment system. And then below that, you have tone, which, if I remember correctly, that actually opens up the audio settings for like bass, treble, etc. Moving up from that, you have all of your climate control settings, or climate control buttons. So on the top left, you have whether or not it's in auto. You have your fan speed, and if you hold that button, it'll turn off the air conditioner. In the middle, you have a button that if you push that ends up being your temperature. There's actually a colored light around the right and left of it for hot and cold that'll show up when the car is on. And you basically rotate that, and it will increase or decrease your temperature. If you hit the fan button first and then rotate that dial, it will adjust the fan speed. And then the button to the top right of the dial will actually control where the air conditioning is coming from. So once again, you have your top vent, medium vent, and lower vent, and then once you cycle through, you can actually enable all of them. And all the way at the top right, you have your AC button, which is air conditioning, whether or not you're using air conditioning for your climate control. Bottom right of that, you have your defroster. And all the way at the bottom left of this whole stack, you have your air circulation button. Moving up above that, you have all of your controls for your windows. So as you can see, the left and rightmost switches control your windows, so up and down. The second from the left switch, which is actually missing, it broke off, controls your front end lift. The one to the right of that is your electronic slip control, whether or not that's enabled. Or you can turn off that switch. In the middle, you have your hazard switch, your hazard lights. Parking sensors on is next to that. The switch next to that is empty. I'm not sure if that's used in any of the models or if they just use it as a filler, but that one doesn't do anything. And moving up above the switches, this is actually a little display that shows your climate control settings. And it also gives you other information like oil pressure and things like that when it's not being used to adjust climate control. Moving up above that, you'll see that you have your 2 center climate control vents. And you'll notice this very aggressive pattern and shape design throughout the entire car. Going over to the right side, you'll see that you do have a glove box down here. And in the section above the glove box, you'll see it has a Lamborghini logo, and it is actually fully 3-dimensional logo. You have your little airbag, passenger airbag light, and once again you have that little cup holder that's part of a optional package. And over on the right, you obviously have your other air conditioner vent. And looking at the top of the dash, it actually has kind of a cool design. You'll see there's a little stitch pattern over on the top right. I believe that's actually where the airbag deploys. Yes, it is. It says airbag on top of it. And you'll see that the section above the front part of the dashboard is actually Alcantara up here. And those would be your top vents, or your defroster. And looking over on the right side of the car, it's identical to the left, obviously, except you don't have the mirror controls and the alarm disable switch. And down on the floor mats, it also says Huracan. And this is what it looks like with the glove box open. As you can see, there's not much space at all. It's literally just enough space for gloves or a instruction booklet, which is what's in here now. And up at the top of the car, you can see that you have your sun visor. Now in these cars, if you pay attention, they actually fold towards you rather than forward as they would in most cars. Going into the center, you have your dome light as well as your book lights left and right. And you'll see a little button in the middle that's just enabling or disabling the lights turning on when the door is open. And going over onto this side, this is what the visor looks like open. And as I said, it opens towards you rather than forward. And also in the center, you have your rear view mirror, which is nothing special at all. And it's just got a little dimmer switch on the bottom. It doesn't have anything digital built into it, it doesn't look like. And down on the footwell next to the kick plate, you have two little buttons. One opens the trunk in the front, the other one opens the oil filler cap in the rear. And these are the pedals down here. As you can see, they're aluminum with little rubber patterns on them. Now going to the steering wheel. You'll see down at the bottom, you have a selector switch. That little red switch at the bottom, you tap up and down to go between Strada, Sport, and Corsa. So Strada is basically the normal / comfort mode. Sport is obviously Sport, and then Corsa would be equivalent to a track mode. So it's the most aggressive. So those light up in red, depending on which one you have selected by tilting that switch up and down. In the center, you obviously have the Lamborghini logo with the airbag below it. This whole center cover is like a rubberized plastic, as it is in most cars. Over on the left, you have some menu item switches going up and down. In the middle one actually accesses the menu. And over on the right, you have blanks. Once again, I'm not sure if these are actually used in any versions of the car, if it's part of an option set, or if they just want it to be symmetrical. On the right spoke, you have your controls for your windshield washers. So you can tilt that switch left or right to increase or decrease the speed, or even the enabling and disabling the windshield wipers. And then above that, you have a little button that controls the spray. So if you hold that button at the top, it'll spray mist on the windshield and it'll wipe. If you just tap it, it'll just do a quick wipe for you on the windshield. And then going over to the left of the steering wheel, you have your light controls. So at the top, you have your headlights. I believe that one's specifically for the high beams. If you push it, the lights, the high beam will go on. And if you hold it, it'll just stay on while you're holding it. The switch at the below that controls your turn signals. So moving it to the left is your left turn signal, right is your right turn signal. If you push it in, it disables them. And I believe if you hold it, it'll actually just keep them flashing as long as you're holding it. If you just tap it, it enables it indefinitely. And if you look behind the steering wheel, you obviously have your shifter paddles. Now, in Lamborghinis and Ferraris, you actually pull both shifter paddles towards you in order to go in neutral. That's how a lot of people, when they do revs and stuff while they're rolling, they just pull those towards them, give it a couple revs, and then pull the right paddle to put it back into gear and keep driving. And going down below the steering wheel, you see you have a little lever here. That allows you to move the steering wheel around, so up, down, in, and out. You just pull it down, and the steering wheel is free to move. Push it back up to lock it back in place. And then moving over to the left of the steering wheel column, you'll see you have a row of buttons, switches, that all control your lights. They're pretty self-explanatory based on the icon. The one all the way to the right actually controls your cruise control. And as you can see, all of these switches also have those cool little bar designs around them that come out. Now moving back up to the instrument cluster, this is what it looks like from the top-down view. It's actually a pretty cool design. Once again, it's very small, tucked away, but it matches with the theme of the car with these extreme angles. Right, so now I'm going to go in and turn on the car so you can see the instrument cluster come to life. So as you can see, when it started up, it said Automobile Lamborghini, and then your entire display is set up here. So going from the right side at the top, you have your distance to empty, so 162 miles in this case, the current time, 5:17 p.m., current external temperature, 71 degrees. And then at the very top, you'll see that it says Benzina. So that is your gas. So that's basically giving you a percentage of how much gas you have left. And then below that, you'll see you have your coolant temperature, or aqua. And if you look at the import source functions and settings positions, you'll notice those correlate with the buttons that I mentioned earlier next to the dial. So you see your top and bottom corners. Each of those buttons is a shortcut for those menu items that you see here in the instrument cluster. Below that, you have your speed. So as you can see, it's got a triple-digit speedometer down there with the miles per hour next to it. To the left of that, you have your odometer, so the current mileage of the car. This one has almost 27,000 miles on it. Moving to the left of that, you have your tachometer. And inside of that, you have the gear that you're in. So I'm currently in park, and my mode is Strada. So going back over to the steering wheel, you can see that Strada is highlighted in red now. As I move the switch down, see it goes into Sport, and then Corsa, which once again is track mode. So I'm going to put it back in Strada, and then I'm going to go back into the instrument cluster. Now, right now we're in Strada, so pay attention to the tachometer. So I put it into Sport, right? No change, but you'll see that it says Sport under the P. And if I move it down into Corsa, you'll see that the idle revs actually go up, and it goes into Corsa and the colors change, right? So right now it's Corsa, which is red, Sport, which is yellow, and then Strada, which is white, right? Because it's the most mild of the drive modes. So a couple other things that change when you change modes. You'll see that up there it says ESC Corsa, so that's your electronic slip control. The mode that it's in right now is Corsa, which is track. Sport, and then Strada, it just has the full ESC, so you're, you have the full electronic nannies covering you. And then you'll see that it's saying that the oil needs to be topped up. That's a thing with the V10s, especially. I believe the V12s have it even worse. But after you drive it for a while, and also especially when you get into the high rev ranges, it starts to burn through oil pretty quickly. I had that problem with AMG V8s and all that stuff as well, and you just have to top it off. Usually it's about a quart, I believe, as soon as that light pops up. And then over on the left side here, you'll see you have the Lamborghini logo illuminated, and then you also have the Bluetooth icon above that blue line above it, just telling you that you have your Bluetooth connected. And the check button down here, if I remember correctly, that'll actually check your fluids and things like that, and just run an overall diagnostics for you real quick, and tell you if you have need to top off your oil or whatever issues you may have. And up here, you obviously have your windshield washer fluid is low. Need to top that off. And if I put my foot on the brake and then shift into gear by pulling the paddle towards me, you can see how the gears change, right? So I'm gonna put it back into park. And now as I rotate the dial over here, let's say I push the top right button next to the dial. You'll see that now it goes into source, and then I can select, my menu items from there. Going into settings, by pushing the bottom right button, it'll go into the settings for that. And you'll notice that when I push that button down here, it actually highlights in red, depending on which one I push. So I push the bottom left, and now that one's highlighted in red. So this is what the key looks like. As you can see, it's basically a plastic key fob with a metal end piece. It's got Lamborghini embossed into the plastic. And then on the end of it, it has a little Lamborghini logo. All that is metal, which is pretty cool. And if you push that little button on the top, it pops out a mechanical key, just like most of these key fobs do, just in case of an emergency, in case the battery goes dead or something like that. And then flipping the key over, this is what it looks like on the other side, where the actual buttons are. So you see at the top, you can lock the car. The one in the middle, you hold that and it pops the trunk in the front. And the bottom button unlocks the car. Alright, so I think that's going to conclude this video. Hopefully you found some useful information, whether you're looking to purchase one of these cars or you're just interested in technical specifications or how things worked. Hopefully you got some useful information out of it.